Okay, historians, let's take a look now at what we can learn about housing from the studies of archaeologists in Pompeii and Herculaneum. So, what I'm going to focus a little bit on today is looking at this particular model you'll see that we'll start playing here soon. It's a film of a model in the University of Penn Museum in Philadelphia in the United States. I saw it last year in 2019, and it's built based upon the studies of houses, the domus, the house, in Pompeii. Also very similar to the houses in Herculaneum. So let's talk about that first. Okay, the centre of everyday life, and I'm just going to pause this for a moment. The centre of everyday life, as I'm saying to you here, is the domus. Now, it's the expectation that every respectable household would have a patrician, a nobleman, a person of high status, usually a man, within it, and he would be the patron of the household. And we still use the idea of a person being the patron of the arts today, someone who supports something. But the patron had a group of clients who lived in his household, were part of his extended household that he was responsible for, and they served him 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. These clients could be slaves, but they were often ex-slaves of the household, descendants of ex-slaves of the household, commoners, servants, generally spoken about as plebeians, commoners, non-noblemen. Now, this patron-client relationship was reflected in the structure and functions of the household. Now, have a look at this house. Here's our main doorway, an atrium. You can see there's a pool of water in the back, and we've got services, shops, food court type areas at the front. We've got upper rooms above the shops here, but the main house is inward looking in behind. So before we go too much further, let's talk about why we need to know about houses. The architecture of housing gives us a really reliable insight into the social structures, the classes, and the social relationships of ancient Roman society. There's a lot of houses, so each house that fits the pattern of behaviour that we're trying to study tends to corroborate the others. One of the issues that we have with all evidence is how does one piece of evidence reflect the entirety of society? In Pompeii and Herculaneum, we've got an entire society with suburbs, what are called insulae of housing. So we can see the patterns of life repeated over and over. One house as a piece of evidence, and what's in it is corroborated by others. It gives archaeologists and historians an insight into the social structures, the social relationships, the classes of ancient Rome. It's useful because it also reveals everything else in that household. Because these houses were completely sealed as they were in 79 AD, we've got everything that was in those houses in that moment repeated over and over and over. So we can see whether an item in a household is actually really a common everyday item or not, or whether something is rare. We can start to tell whether a house represents a large family, a wealthy family, a poor family, and so on. We can see what is produced in the shops by the utensils they have and so forth. Now the villas, the large houses of wealthy people, usually in the countryside, the shops, the factories, the insulae, these suburbs, okay, are all really, really, really useful. And Pompeii has many villas a part of it. And Herculaneum particularly had a lot of walk-up apartments, a little bit more like our blocks of units that we see in Australia today. The buildings tend to reveal what was valued in the society. It reveals items of status. They reveal art. They reveal what the symbols of prestige were and so on. So let's have a look at this model now in the University of Penn. I'll probably play it a couple of times, get a sense of it rotating around. I filmed this on my mobile phone while I was in the museum, and I'm going to bring up for you some little commentary on it as it goes. So let's play this, and first off say that you can see shops, services on either side of the main door called the atrium. As we come around to the side, we'll just pause for a moment. Above the shops, in this area here, we've got a mezzanine floor, and that's where the clients and the slaves had small bedrooms above their shop fronts, and the main house starts here. Let's play a little bit more. There's a rainwater collection point here. the impluvium. Okay, before Pompeii was connected to the aqueduct, this rainwater point, where water came off the tiled roofs and fell down, was essentially the water supply for the house. After Rome connected Pompeii to the aqueduct system, then the impluvium became really a decorative feature. All right, let's go to the next bit. The bedrooms tended to be closest to the atrium, while the dining room areas tended to open onto an open space called the peristyle. So let's play a little bit more here. Getting a sense of it, I'll hit pause again. So here's our dining room, here's our peristyle. The kitchen areas, the bathrooms and so on tended to be furthest from the entrance area. And toilet facilities, which aren't shown very well here. You can see they've got kind of a bedroom here, so it's not the main pattern. But the toilet type facilities tend to be tucked down the back here, and they were commonly flushed out by a bucket system or a chamber pot system. Okay, so let's play a little bit forward. All the houses had an inward facing symmetrical style, and we'll see a view from above here in a moment as I go around the outside of the glass case. They've got an inward looking style. The main features of the house are the inside, and they're very symmetrical. So I'll go around the outside wall in a moment. And so everything is shaped inwards. When we can see windows, which are mainly on the other side over here and on the front, they tend to be very high up and quite small. This is to keep the sunlight out and intruders out. You're getting a sense of the floor plan here of a fairly typical villa according to a model made by the University of Penn. So getting a sense of what it's like from above and around. I thought that was a really useful tool. Let's now have a look at some other features, and I'm going to show you other videos that I made at the University of Pennsylvania. The volume of evidence, and I'll just hit pause because I didn't want to start that yet. The volume of evidence that we get from Pompeii and Herculaneum makes the archaeological sites really very, very important. The evidence in Pompeii and Herculaneum is particularly useful when it's corroborated by lots of other similar finds in the area. So in a moment, we'll actually have a look at some of the plaster work that is actually from Pompeii. And what I'm showing you here is from Pompeii. I don't think you can quite read the labels here, but everything that I'm showing you in these videos and so on from the University of Pennsylvania are essentially in an American museum taken from Pompeii or Herculaneum or nearby areas around Vesuvius. So as we start to look at this plaster, you'll see already, before I hit play on it and before we get the close-ups happening, there are, I guess I'll go back to the commentary here, that Andrew Wallace Hadrill, who is an archaeologist, conducted a study of the houses and found that the presence and quality of wall painting in Pompeian houses directly related to the number and size of the room. So the more paintings, the higher the quality, the bigger the household. So it was the wealthier the house, the more of these painted walls they had, more artworks are in it. So let's have a look at what that artwork might look like in the walls, and have a look very closely as I zoom in now at the actual paintings on the wall. You can see that these are bits of wall broken off, chipped off. You can see mythological gods and so forth painted into it, like a serpent type creature here in the top right. You can see other quite intricate design, leaf designs, very fine designs as we go in. Many colours. Now think of what an archaeologist can do with this. They can take samples of the paint, they can see where the pigments come from, how the paints are made. They can start studying the composition of the plasters involved. They can start studying brush techniques. They can figure out the shape of brushes. There's a huge amount that can be determined just from looking at the painted wall mouldings in plaster. We can learn a great deal from that. Let's now go into this other still image that I've got from the internet. Records are showing that slaves are an important part of the community in Pompeii and Herculaneum. They played an extremely important part in the businesses of patrons, and they could hold household roles of real significance. So this idea that slaves just did menial jobs is perhaps underrating the importance of some slaves. Certainly they had no legal rights, but they could find themselves being treated like family members. In some cases, they grew up with the patron. They were the patron's playmate at a younger age. They lived with their entire life. They were kind of the closest confidants in some cases. And they were even buried in the family graves with their patrons. Now, we've done activities in class where you've looked at the city walls of Pompeii and you've seen outside each of the main gates, there are necropolises, basically graveyards. And in those graveyards, there's all sorts of different types of cemetery, grave, tomb areas. But often they carry inscriptions of slaves being buried with their masters as if they are a close family member. So hopefully that's given you a few ideas to think about in terms of housing, social structure, the kind of evidence that's found in Pompeii and Herculaneum.